Welcome to the Inspired Hygiene Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Wall. I'm an RDH and founder of Inspired Hygiene. For over 20 years, we've had the unique opportunity to see what really happens inside thousands of dental hygiene ops and what it takes to create transformational change that impacts the lives of patients, practice owners, and teams. Each season, we'll focus on one powerful topic, breaking it down with practical strategies, real stories, and tools you can use right away. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you back to the Inspired Hygiene Podcast. This season, as you know, if you've been listening in, is all about the dentist-hygienist relationship. How do we build this relationship? How do we rebuild this relationship? And I am super excited to be joined by a friend and colleague, Dr. Mike Sonick. Dr. Sonick, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
You and I met, oh my gosh, it's probably been, 7 or 8 years ago. We met through Kane Waters, and I had the honor to come in and work with your practice just to, help everybody on your team get on the same page with regards to just refining diagnostic standards, clinical, hygiene protocols and that kind of thing. And your team was phenomenal. And I had a really great experience. Was just so impressed by you and your practice. And since then, you have this whole another career.
Yeah.
So you are a full-time practicing periodontist. You are a highly regarded authority in dental implantology and periodontology. Your bio is extremely long, and we're going to link that so folks can read that. But even in addition to your full-time perio practice, you have this whole other career. Tell us about this whole other career that you've developed.
Well, I'm a full-time, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. And because I'm speaking, with someone who has a very similar philosophy. So it's very, very easy. We know each other very well. And having you come to my office was great because it set a lot of protocols in place. And that's sort of what we're going to be talking together, because almost everything in practice has a protocol. So let me talk a little bit about myself. I started my own practice in 1985. I was the sixth periodontist in the town of 65,000. And everybody told me that I would fail, not to open up. It was the wrong location. But I decided to open up a fee-for-service practice, and I just wanted to treat ideally. And it took me 3 years to become profitable. And that's been 42 years ago. And I'm doing okay now. I'm doing very well. Because I decided that I wanted to create a certain type of a practice where we would treat comprehensively. It would not be insurance-based, which was difficult early on and still not, and where I would actually have a very, very vibrant hygiene program, which is the backbone. So I'm a boarded periodontist. I've been teaching since 1984 at NYU and University of Connecticut. I probably teach 2 days a week. I've written 7 books. But my last book is the one I'm most proud of. It's called Treating People, Not Patients. And it's all about bringing hospitality to patients. And what that means is developing a really good human connection. So when a patient comes into our practice, they're scared to death. They're full of anxiety. They're full of fear. They don't trust anybody. Even if I had treated their mother, their sister, their brother, their kids, and they know me, and they've all had good experiences, when they're in my chair, they don't know if I'm going to be on top of my game that day or if things are going to work out. So that's what that book is about. It's about how the patient sees, the doctor. And I wrote it during COVID. It was my COVID project. I decided I was going to write it about 7 years ago, and I've been talking about it for about 7 years. And a friend of mine, Bob Levine, who's a well-known periodontist from Philadelphia, and he says, I'm talking about your book in my lectures. Everyone wants to know when it's coming out. I hadn't started writing it yet. So COVID came, and then so I wrote the book. It took me about 7 months. Now I could write it in about 5 minutes with ChatGPT. But back then it was a labor process that was very laborious. And I got it out. And for last year, I still teach clinical dentistry. I teach surgery and implants, but my true passion, everybody teaches implants today, but nobody teaches human connectivity in healthcare. Nobody who's actually a doctor anyway. And so that's my goal is to change the way healthcare is delivered by improving the relationship between a healthcare practitioner, whether it's an assistant, a hygienist, front desk person, doctor, with the patient. So that's my goal. That's my moonshot. And it's a hard one because when I talk about it, people say, well, You talk too much to patients. You're not doing procedures. How much money am I going to make by being nice to people? And I tell them quite a bit. And you wanted to talk a little bit about trust today. And there's a book called The Speed of Trust. I'll show it to you here. I just pulled it out of my library. It's written by Stephen Covey, but not Stephen Covey Sr. He passed away. Stephen Covey Sr., well known for writing The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is his son, who's a Harvard MBA. And he said the most important thing in business, very successful businessman, is trust. If you don't trust the person you're working with, what happens is relationships break down, or they become what Adam Grant from University of Pennsylvania talks about ambiguity. And if you have ambiguity in relationships, we have that all the time. I'm sure you feel it when you're talking to doctors. Am I going to come in? Am I not going to come in? How much are you going to pay for this? What am I going to get? Is it worth the time and training? They're not going to be seeing patients. My production is going to be dropping that day. All that comes in. And there's a lot of tension, and not everybody talks about what's really going on. And so there becomes what we call ambiguity in a relationship. When that happens, your blood pressure goes up, you're not clear, and you're not really effective. And so I think it's really important that we build those really clear relationships in our practice with protocols, with developing relationships with our patients. But the most important thing besides myself, because I believe you, Rachel, me, Michael, my individual people in my life, they're most important that they take care of themselves. But the second most important is our team. And that's a big problem. I know today people say, I can't hire, I don't have a staff, whatever. And, I don't have that problem because we hire very slow, and it's very hard to get a job in our office. No one knows that. We interview either by resume or culture indices or in-person interview 400 people before we hire one person. People go, how do you get so many people? I go, well, we have a lot of ads. We're constantly hiring. So I'm always hiring, even if I don't need anybody, because I'm looking for that next person. And if I don't need them, oftentimes we'll hire them because somebody may get pregnant or move, or go back to dental school or something like that. So,
yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And I want to dig deeper into this concept of trust, because as you and I were prepping for this, I said, hey, this season is about building or rebuilding this hygiene dentist relationship. And I shared with you how there's been a lot of tension between dentists and hygienists just in the industry over the last 5 years. And a lot of it is about, I'm going to say, there's not enough hygiene capacity for hours, right, for the amount of patient care in many practices that I speak with. And hygiene, wages have gone up, and there's just a lot of I think what it comes down to, Dr. Sonick, it is a loss of trust. That is what I believe has happened. And you say in this article, we'll link to this article that you talked about this recently, was that the root problem in a lot of this tension is a loss of trust. And I mentioned that to you, and you said, well, I'm not experiencing that in my practice. So talk to us a little bit about that. How are you not having those challenges?
well, we do have the challenges. I don't have none, but it's not a big problem.
Yeah.
First of all, every day I rehire everybody in the practice. My employees are volunteers, so they don't have to be there, and they're always going to be looking for another job. If you looked at the data and the statistics, I don't know if you know Michael Hall from Culture Index, and I use his Culture Index to hire. That's one of the things. Before I even interview anybody, I need a resume, I need a employment application, I need a Culture Index. Then we'll do an interview. So I interview people, and I try to find people who have high integrity. Now, you cannot test for integrity. So the most important aspect for anybody in my practice or my life is in having integrity. Now, do I have people in my life that have low integrity? Well, we all have low integrity some days. We're not all perfect, Nobody's perfect. We're all human beings, and we're all flawed. But I want people to strive for having high integrity. So if I'm surrounded by a team with high integrity, we don't have that tension, and we have ways of dealing with that. One of the ways that we do is, a number of years ago, we wrote a mission statement, again from Stephen Covey. Our mission statement is 35 years old. It was really long-winded. It went on to improve the quality of patients' lives with education and caring in a trusted environment to get the best. Nobody could remember it. So we shortened it 5 years ago, and our mission statement today is to improve the quality of our patients' lives. Very simple. Everybody knows it. So our whole team Okay, we're not a dental practice. Okay, let me take you back one. We're a hospitality practice. So when you come to our practice, we're not there to sell you dentistry. We're there to give you a good experience. Now, by the way, part of that may be having dentistry. And one of the things that I like better than anything else is to tell someone who comes in there, because I get about 5 or 6 patients referred for gingival grafting. Very few need them. I've never lost a tooth because they didn't have a gingival graft. I never saw a tooth fall out because of that recession. I tell about 40% of them they don't need any work. And so that's, for me, is a good day. I'm not making any money, but I'm making somebody feel good. And by having that type of relationship with my patients, guess what? Dentists trust me. They know I'm not going to be treating everybody that comes in. I'm not going to be treating 95% of the patients. And because they trust me, then the patients trust me. And then they leave happy and they go back. They go, I didn't need anything. And I'll write a letter and I'll tell them what they need. So how do we get a practice filled with people with trust? Well, it starts at the top. So if you have a dentist who is pretty much the visionary of the practice, it's usually the dentist, but it could be the wife of the dentist. It could be the office manager, but somebody has to lead. The problem in dental practices is that oftentimes there's no leader. And if there's no leader, it's chaos. And the leaders has to sometimes have the conversations that are a little bit more difficult to have. And I'll explain some of those with, I'll give you some examples during the podcast. So as I am the leader in our practice, I started the practice 42 and a half years ago. I developed all the protocols. And one of the protocols that I developed with the help of I have 2 partners. I have 3 periodontists in the practice and 5 hygienists. So that's our practice. And we're open 5 days a week, 8 to 5. That's how we practice. And we developed what we call core values, and they're very popular in a lot of businesses. Almost every business has them. Especially financial businesses, they're always going to talk about trust. You know how honest they are as they're ripping off. Joke, sort of. All right, but it's trust is people don't trust anybody anymore, and a lot of that has become eroded because of social media and the things that people are posting. And a lot of dentists aren't successful financially, or they have debt, and so money gets involved. And money is only one part of the equation. I have to take that out. I cannot practice basically solely on money. I have to practice based upon the core values. So we've established 5 core values, and the first one is having integrity, and the second one is being a good teammate, and the third one is being very servant-hearted. And the fourth one is being health oriented. And the fifth one is being an educator. And that means educate yourself and your patients. So out of those 5 core values, education, health, teammate, servant hearted, and integrity, integrity is number 1. So we cannot have anyone in our practice work with us who doesn't have integrity. And we try to find that out during the hiring process, which is a whole other conversation itself. But one thing I always look for in the hiring process is that I look for cracks in integrity. And are there any? And so if I'm interviewing you, Rachel, I might say, well, how was your last job? And if you start to tell me, I liked it, but the dentist was good, but I couldn't stand the employees and this and that, you start to gossip before you even know me. I realize this is someone that probably doesn't have high integrity. Or if I catch you lying, like something like that. Or what I usually do is I usually try to when I'm interviewing, get someone upset about something, and I want to hear what they're upset about, because that's when they're being very honest. Like my partner, Dr. Ma, who's been with me for 13 years, a very, very quiet guy, doesn't show any emotion, very nice guy, but that's how he presents. I want to know where he was inside, where's his heart. So I continued to interview him, and I wanted to get him angry. And so I finally asked him, I said, does anyone ever upset you, in dentistry or something? He go, no. I go, we ever upset with anybody, maybe a co-resident? And all of a sudden his face turned, and one of the co-residents did something inappropriately, hurt a patient, didn't take responsibility, was continuing to hurt him. And he got really angry, and he went to the dean. And he says, I can't, which is a big deal. And he says, he couldn't take it. So I realized this guy will sacrifice his who he's being for integrity. And so I said, I love that. And we've been together 13 years, and we've had 2 fights. Each one lasted 90 seconds because we met very quickly. Dr. Ma,
Yeah.
he's a great guy. So
And
these 4 values are extremely important.
yeah. So, okay. So just dive into a couple of things here.
Sure.
what I want to say too is about the consistency of these protocols that you have, because your protocol of doing culture index and other, leaders and practices might have other assessments that they really believe in. But when you were hiring Inspired Hygiene and you knew that I was going to be your coach, you asked me to take the culture index. Do you remember that?
Well, you're a Ranger. Yeah, you have a high A, and and you have a high B too. So you
But
also have a high
the fact,
logic. I remember all that about you.
yeah.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So the fact that you remember
I
that
forgot. I
means
forgot that I asked you to take that before I
you
hired you.
did.
Yeah.
You did. You asked me to do that. Consistency, right? You did that with all your team members. And the fact that you remember that also means that you put a lot of weight on that because you trust this tool. And you're putting a lot of thought into your hire. Like you said, you hire very slowly. And I want to pull out just a couple points from this article, because you said that you can't build a high trust culture with low integrity people.
No, you
And
can't.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and you've given us a couple tips on how you can get a sense of where someone's integrity is when you're in that interview process. So, and then you also said a team that's not trusted will never take ownership. And my thought process as I was preparing for this was ownership of what? So we talked about protocols. A lot of practices, the team doesn't take ownership because there's nothing for them to take ownership of.
Mhm.
There are no clear standards. And so then what
Right.
happens is they create their own. And
Right.
then it creates all these little different standards within the practice instead of everybody moving in one direction. So I'd love to hear you kind of talk about how do you when you bring when you bring people on the team, or even with your existing long-term team members, what do you do when you see maybe things straying from the agreed upon standards?
Right. Well, the first thing you said is protocols and standards. Most offices don't have a protocol manual, or if they do, it's outdated. So, what a protocol manual is a solution manual to problems. So, anytime we have a problem, we don't have a protocol for that. Simple one. We're out of oxygen. We can't do any surgery today. Well, we only have one tank, so we got two tanks now. And then we have a protocol that someone checks the oxygen at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day. And then when the tank gets low, someone calls and one person will tell this person, not a bunch of people, but one person is responsible for ordering the oxygen. It happens to be Liz, but any assistant can tell. Well, we have two tanks. And then we ran out then because the oxygen company, it's got a what's the word? A monopoly on the area. And they won't be out for a week. So now we have 3 oxygen tanks in the office. Okay. And we don't use that much. And we have 2 nitrous tanks. So we have a protocol for that. So when there's a problem, we say, what's the protocol? There's no protocol. I have a protocol for what type of music is playing in the reception area. I have a protocol of what kind of fruit is in the nice bowl. It happens to be fresh apples. They're bought on Sunday. They're put out on Monday. They're put in the refrigerator. They weren't put on the refrigerator for a while. They're going rotten. So we put them away. So everything in the office has a protocol. The beauty of bringing you in is we developed a protocol. I did not have as strong protocols in hygiene, and I'm a periodontist, until you came in. We brought out a little scale. We probed with like 50 grams so they can go over it. We tested that. I don't know if that was you or if I did that from Dr. Otto Zur. We looked at hygiene. We looked at bleeding upon probing. I wasn't charting that as accurately. We weren't talking about everything else. So we now have standardized our protocols. The hygienist cannot come in and decide to do it her way unless her way is better than our way. So we have a rule in the office. We have a protocol, and I have a protocol for everything. I have a protocol for every instrument I put out. I have a protocol when I take out a tooth. I have a protocol list, a checklist in every room. When I walk in there, this, and this has to be done. Is it done every day? Most of the time, it's not done perfectly, but the protocol's there. And I have to be responsible for saying, hey, the protocols are not being followed. So if you have protocols and not being followed, then the system is bad. This was not made up in medicine. A lot of these protocols come out of the airline industry. If your airlines crashes and all of a sudden they say, why the crash? You lose 360 people. Most problems are due to pilot error. Most surgical problems, 90%, are due to surgeon error. Okay, so not because the patient healed badly, it's the surgeon made a mistake. So the protocols of human beings have to be established and they have to be followed. So having a protocol is not enough. You have to review them and follow them. When you do that, you got to have meetings. You got to assess it. Someone has to watch it. Someone has to be head of the hygiene department. Someone has to be a head assistant. And that's the big problem in dental practices. We're too busy seeing patients that we don't spend the time educating our team. If you go to a great restaurant in Manhattan, let's say one of the top restaurants in Manhattan, Gramercy Tavern, one of my favorite restaurants. And a lot of my protocols come out of two things: restaurants, airline industry, and the checklist manifesto. I have it here somewhere. Here we go. Another product placement. This is a book that everybody should read, The Checklist Manifesto by Atal Gawande. It is a Bible from the medical field on how to run a medical practice. And if you don't have a checklist for everything that you're doing, how do you know if you're going to do the right thing? And if you have an employee, we have 22 employees in our practice. We can't have everybody going rogue because it's not going to be very good. When Dr. Ma joined me, I had a checklist and a way of doing surgery. And he came in and I trained him how I did it. And he started doing things differently. I said, if you do things differently than me, your outcome better be different. And then I will do it that way. If you're changing it just because you feel like it, I go, you can't change it. So, an example. I had a speaker on that talked about antibiotics. And she said that you don't have to give antibiotics for these procedures and you only have to give one dose. Now, for the last 42 years, my antibiotic protocol has been one dose of amoxicillin before if you're not allergic, and you're on amoxicillin 3 times a day for 5 days when we're doing bone grafting, connective tissue grafts. My surgical complication abscess rate is close to 0. Well, my partner decided after going through this lecture, he's going to change it. He's just going to give a loading dose. All of a sudden, I go, why are you doing that? Now my staff has different protocol for you, different with me. They can't remember it. He uses one end of the retractor. I use the other end. Why are you doing that? Let's be the same. And after 3 post-op corrections, we went back to my protocol. Now it's the same protocol because it didn't work. But I understand that people want to do what they want to do. They want to make it their own, but you can't. And one of the things that we are in our office is a team. If I'm playing football, for, I don't know, the Patriots, and I'm the quarterback, and, my left defensive tackle doesn't feel like blocking, on a long count, because by the time he's probably, the linebacker probably won't get through. You can't make that decision. We have a protocol for what you're supposed to be doing, and we're all on the same team. So we try to do that. So back to restaurants. In great restaurants, do you know what percentage of the time they spend training? 10% of their week. 10% of their week, they're training. There's something called pre-service. So if you go to a great restaurant, if you go there, let's say you have reservations at 5 o'clock, you go there at 4:45, there's one man or woman standing there and everyone's looking at them, rapt attention. And it's run like a military operation. And they go through 30 minutes of who's coming, any VIPs here, new things on the menu. Do you know how to say that? It's something new term. It's a French term. They go through that. And they show them how to put the glasses down. And you can tell this when you go to a restaurant, if they're trained or not. Mm-hmm. And so I become so critical that, I never like to go out to eat anymore because nobody knows what they're doing. Joke. I like to go out to eat, but, I'm tolerant because, like dental offices, very few people have a protocol for everything. So it's really important that we give feedback. That feedback should be given not in the middle of action. So when something is done wrong during a day, I have a little business card. I may have one here or a sticky note. I tell my assistant, I'll have her write something down or him write something down. I go, write down Susan B, 4 o'clock. It's my own code. They don't know what I'm talking about. And I'll put it there. And at the end of the day, I'll look down all the things that I think need to be addressed. And I put them on a piece of paper that's in a shared document called the morning meeting. And the next morning, we're going to talk about it. And I said, this is what happened yesterday. I won't make anybody wrong in the middle of the day, and I'll address it. That requires someone to be able to put their personal feelings aside and not take things personally, which is very hard. But it's a very hard thing to do. But they have to put that aside if it's going to be the benefit of the team. So you have to have those clear, direct, honest conversations, which are not pleasant. But since I've been doing it the same way for so many years, people aren't surprised when I say it, and I do it with humor and I never do it with anger. If like the team said, my front desk, we have 4 or 5 people up there, they complain that they're understaffed. And I'll walk up there and they got their backs to the computer and they're talking about something social. I'm not going to say, get back to the computer. I go, man, we need to hire one more person, don't we? And I'll walk away. That's all I got to say. I mean, I'm not hiring babies. These are human beings. Most people are over 30, So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that's important stuff. But you have to have clear, direct communication. You got to go back. And
So, okay, let's
go
talk
ahead.
about that let's talk about that feedback for just a second. Because
Yeah.
the title is really important, right? So we're talking about trust. We're talking about building trust. We're talking about that there's been lost trust, and we're working on like building that back up between hygienists and dentists. And feedback is really important. And feedback goes both ways. So your feedback that you're giving is not necessarily in the moment, right? In the heat of the moment when it's not in front of a patient,
Right.
never in front of a patient, because your goal is to give patients an incredible experience. And how awkward is it for a patient to hear someone get reprimanded, right? That's not a good experience for the patient either, or anybody. And yet you're doing it within a timely manner, right? You're probably doing that within 24 hours,
Yes.
and it doesn't have emotion, but it is, hey, I think our system's falling down in this particular area. Do we need to evaluate the system? Because that's possible. Do we need to evaluate the system? Because things do change, and I'm sure you have times where during your training points you evaluate systems and you update things, like for your example. Um, is there ever been a time, or are there times where your team gives you feedback?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me go back to systems and I'll go back to that in a second. I want to compliment you. When you came in, this hygienist like these instruments, this instrument, they all had their separate sets. So what we ended up doing, we standardized it. We standardized it. It cost us some money. We spent about $10,000 on instruments, but we now have in every room, we have a hair polisher, we have the Cabotron, we have the Prophy Jet, we have their own instruments, so they can do whatever they want. Nobody fights over instruments anymore, and every hygienist has their own
Great.
set in his bag. And I got my own air polisher, and when one of them broke, they took it and they broke it. And we have one heavy-handed hygienist, and we know who she is. Her name, if you're listening, it's you, Ashley. And she was my dental assistant before, so she's gone through hell to get to become a hygienist. She's been a dental assistant, went to hygiene school, and then came back. And so I have a big note on it. Okay, doctors only, so they're not allowed to touch it, and it's purple. Okay, so they're not, and it's been working lately. So that's a protocol. So anyway, getting all those things, the feedback was they didn't have the good instruments. So $10,000, but guess what? I haven't heard a complaint, and they love it. Everybody loves it. I have 5 hygienists that all love their instruments. That's pretty good. Do they give me
Yes.
feedback? Yes, they give me feedback. That's the rules. All right. There's a story in Talcawande's book, which I'm sure you've heard before. It was a Korean jet, commercial flight going to Korea, and a senior pilot was heading toward a mountain. And this happened about 40 years ago. And the junior pilot said, we're heading toward a mountain. Now, in Korea, the younger people respect the older, not like America. They still do. That's one of the reasons why I only hire Asian doctors. Okay. I have a Chinese doctor and a Korean doctor. So, because they still respect me. Okay. If they're American, they would have kicked me out already. But the younger pilot said, we're heading toward the mountain. And he said, no, we're not. And because he was respectful, 360 people died. So we have a thing. It's protocol. I walk into the room and I turn to Danielle. I go, what tooth? She goes, 19. I go, 19, the lower left. She goes, yes. I turn to the patient, tooth 19, tooth 19. Patient goes, you don't know? I go, I do know, but I've never taken out the wrong tooth yet. I don't want to make it. My assistant, who's been with me for 15 years, if I pick up something and if I'm missing something, she goes, did you see the calculus there? She goes, what about a suture there? What about that? Yes, they have to tell me. There has to be feedback. And if I can't take it, I can't give it. So there's an expression that I always use in my lectures: the life that you lead is the lesson you teach. They won't listen to me if I'm not doing it. So the problem that you will face in your coaching is you're coaching hygienists and doctors, but then the team is not always coherent, cohesive. And that's, you can teach all you want, but if they're not going to follow your protocols, it becomes a problem. And it's hard to have those hard conversations. We have a dress code in our office, white sneakers, same green slubs, hair comb, shower. Well, the shower wasn't a dress code. It is now. I'll tell you in a second. No dandruff, fingernails cut, no long nails, etc. And I hired a new person as a male, fortunately. And he is from Ireland. He's one of my best employees ever. But he didn't shower in the morning. So by about 2:00, he had very bad body odor. And I smelled it. I ignored it for a couple of days. And then 4 employees came and talked to me. So I've never had to call an employee and say, you need a bad body odor. But I know why he had it. I said, I've heard I don't smell it, but some people said you have some body odor. I said, so I took an inventory. I go, do you shower? He goes, yes, every night. I go, do you shower in the morning? He goes, I don't. I said, could you shower in the morning and put on deodorant? And then I have deodorant. I have 2 showers in my office. If at 1 o'clock you need a shower, go upstairs and take one. Well, since the conversation, he has not had any body odor. And he thanked me. He goes, thank you so much, because I did it in a kind way. So I gave him that feed. And since then, he's been promoted. Now he runs not only the sterilization area, he runs the whole lab for the office. He's only been there a year. Yeah, he's like the most loved employee. But if I didn't have that conversation, it could have been very easy to, and that's something that's a conversation that most people don't have to have, but it's an important conversation, as well as removing all the calculus,
Yeah,
for pocket depth, et cetera.
yeah. Those are tough conversations, but they're ones that are necessary because you're building trust, because it shows that you care about him and you care about his longevity in your practice, and also his place with the team. It also shows that you respect the team. I just came across a Harvard Business Review article about, is your leadership style too nice? And I shared it in one of our recent newsletters.
Yeah.
And I think that is because of out of fear. I think a lot of leaders are not bringing up things with their team because they're afraid team's going to leave. And it has been really hard to hire, high quality, high integrity individuals. And so I get that. However, what happens a lot of times is you end up losing, if there's someone that's not a culture fit, or if they just don't understand and they need more clear understanding and coaching so that they do fit those core values. Because sometimes they just simply don't know what they don't know, right? This gentleman didn't know what he didn't know. And
Yeah, exactly.
you were willing to have that hard conversation. But sometimes what happens is you end up losing a really good long-term employee because the leader didn't address a culture mismatch or something that was violating the core values.
Yeah, it's whenever we have a problem in the office, we look at the core values, what's not being met. And the top 3 ones are integrity, team, servant-hearted, and being a good teammate. You don't want the hygienist to leave all dirty instruments because, they have to pick up their kid at 4:00. I'm sorry, take care of it. And you do that, 1 day, 2 days. After a few days, you're not making your commitments. I always say that life works to the extent to which you keep your commitments. I learned that from my dad. And, it's very important that people do that. And we're very open in the office about it. We know that everybody is not the strongest. Some people, have some weaknesses, but they have some strengths. And their strengths.
They all do.
Yeah. Like me, I'm very direct. So I'm a good leader because I'm very direct. I'm very honest. I'm a visionary. I know where I'm going, but I'm not always nice. Okay. Because sometimes I'm not being mean. I'm just telling you how it is. Okay. You have body odor. I'm not saying it to be mean, but you have body odor. You're coming late. Okay. You lied to me about that patient because you're covering yourself. You felt badly about missing something. That's a hard conversation to have. Now, what about that one? So I don't have that one always. I just know that they have a tendency to do that. So not everything has to be said. I will never say anything out of anger. I very rarely get angry, so I'm lucky there. But I don't say anything because I think it needs to be corrected immediately. These are all human beings that are really trying their best. And, we talked about how do I get them to do that? Everybody is really, they're not coming to work just for money. Of course, they're coming to work for money, but they're coming to work to do something that's greater than themselves and that vision. And our team is all aligned with that. And that requires having a lot of meetings. And I work real hard at building the team. I actually have someone in my office. She's been promoted now. She's now director of hospitality. So her job is not just for patients, make sure the birthdays and funeral cards go out and that. But every day she celebrates somebody in the office. It's like they're all getting really fat because they're doing the cakes. That's what they said. We can't have any more cakes. We're getting fat. I mean, the cakes are coming. You don't have to eat them all. But it's like in the office. We have all that stuff. But I think that everybody there also has another job. So like the chief of hospitality answers the phone as well. We have somebody who does the ordering, but she's also a clinical assistant. The person in the lab does some assisting. The chief, everybody has another job there in the office besides that. Someone takes care of getting all the, fresh fruits and everything out there. So they feel like they're all part of something, greater. Mm-hmm. And I have some very specific jobs too. And my job is to have the hard conversations, with people. I don't mind having them. I actually like it. So my door is always open and people are always coming and going. And, I'm doing about 30 minutes of therapy a day. But one thing that I really try to do is I try to touch everybody in that office. Come in. How was your weekend? Your husband okay? I know he was in the hospital. How's your dad? Just briefly, because a lot of people feel invisible and they have no commitment. And close to 78% of the population, not in dental offices, but in regular, if you look at since you read the Harvard Business Review, all this stuff. They're looking for another job. They're not saying this is it. And I used to, I up until about 3 weeks ago, I have had zero turnover in 2.5 years. I have a total of 25 employees. That's pretty nice number. And I just lost one dental assistant who's a dentist from Poland because she is going to have children and she's going to work online, doing laboratory work. So I can't say that anymore. But I got the nicest letter from her, which I just posted, saying what a great opportunity it was for me to hire her from Poland because it was like she didn't know what she was going to learn in those 5 years. So it was pretty cool. Lose some, but turnover is very costly, and having no trust is even more costly, and it's not fun. And these are just simple things that we've all learned a long time ago that we just don't practice, because we're too busy, because we're thinking about the most important person in our lives, ourselves. We just get caught up in that all day long. And when we're there, we can't be of any use to anybody else. So, and I have a patient. His name is Stu Leonard. I don't know if you know him. He owns the largest privately owned um, supermarkets they do $500 million of business a year. So he knows how to run business. He's got 5 of them. His father was a milkman. He opened up a small market, like about 50 years ago. And they've been patients for a long time. And Stu came in this is like 35 years ago. And his company is always voted by Forbes one of the top 50 companies to work for. They don't have a lot of turnover. And people are really nice when you go in there. And so I said to him, I go, Stu, how come everybody's so happy in your office? How do you hire? How do you do it? He goes, well, we hire them and then they watch a 20-minute video that my dad made back in 1972. I go, yeah. Because then they go to work. And so what he really told me was we have a culture. And they say culture trumps strategy any day. You've probably heard that. They have a great culture. And because they have a great culture, I don't have to fire anybody. After 3 days, if it's not right fit, they're out of there. They know they're not the right fit. So I did hire somebody recently. Not because I was against it, but it was a patient of Ray's, and she was nice, and she was older, and we thought she'd bring maturity to the office. And it was a day 2. I knew it was a bad fit. We tried to keep her, and then the team all knew it. And then she just says, this is not right for me. And it was nice because she just left, and she left on nice, she came to our Christmas party and then said goodbye. Mm-hmm. And that just, that was nice because she knew it wasn't the right fit. She was in over her head. And so people sort of know. But I've been in so many offices where there's this fighting going on, and I don't like it. And my dad used to manage 150 people at Sikorsky Aircraft. And he says, you got to set the tone, but you don't get involved in the fights. And when there is a fight in my office, I have a form that I give them. I was just joking about this the other day. It's called the experience transformer. And if 2 people are fighting in the office about this, I go, okay. I hand the form, and the form says, what happened? Why did it occur? And number 3 is the best. What is my part in it? And number 4 is, what am I going to do to make sure it never happens again? So people don't come to me because they don't want to fill out that form. It's just like, I'm responsible, right? And so I'm very, I love my team. I have a great team. You've met them. We do a lot of parties. I tell them it's enough already. There's always a birthday. We have a staff, we have a hygiene meeting every 3 months. We have an assistant meeting every 3 months. We take them to dinner every 3 months. I get the admin meetings. It's like every 3 months, I got to go out to dinner with these folks. It's enough. And if my wife goes, where are you? Dinner with the team. We have the staff building day in the summer where we spend 14 hours in New York City. We rent out a whole beautiful room for Christmas, and we bring the spouses too. It's good. It's fun.
You love it. I know you love it.
I love team building, and I love making people better. I really love. Yeah. I don't love like drilling holes and putting in implants, although that's what I'm well known for. I'm good at it, but that's like, there are some doctors, they could do this all day long. They just love it. Hey, I sent you a great case. I don't care about a great case. I want to be able to help somebody. You know what I mean?
Well, I think we all learn so many different things from the thing that we were trained to do. Like I'm a dental hygienist, right? But look at all the things I've been able to learn to do as my career has evolved. And I think whether you are out speaking, you're writing a book, you're working chairside, whatever it is, if we, literally and figuratively lift our head up and see like what else is around us, it's like, hey, you know, you learned customer service working in that practice. You learned how to create systems. You learned how to resolve conflict. Like, look at all those different things. So I would like to ask you the question that we're asking at the end of at all of these podcasts, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but so what is your advice for our industry, where, I think a lot of the industry is kind of what you said. It's we're all looking out for our own self-interest or the interest of our piece of the industry.
Mhm.
What is your advice of how do we all come back together and get focused back on like what are we even doing here? What is our purpose, in this profession? What advice would you give to folks that are really trying to get back to that purpose and and really just move forward from there?
Yeah, I think you just said it. It's purpose. You know, if you look at, I do a lot of studies on longevity. I do a lot of reading on that topic, and I talk about, how can you live a long, happy life, right? You got to eat right, whatever that means. I'm not going to give any dietary advice. You got to exercise every day. You got to move. You got to sleep, and got to do practice mindfulness, whether it's prayer, meditation, but just to quiet yourself. People say to me all the time, Mike, you always going, you always going. I take 2 hours a day for myself every day. It's early in the morning before I get up. And so I take care of that self. But I think what I think is very important is, as my coach is Dan Sullivan from Toronto. And
Mhm.
he says you have to have a future that is greater than your past. And what that means, and he's 82. And I just went to Jeff Shapiro's birthday party, who's 70 in New York, and his father gave a toast at 95. And at the end of his father's toast, who still plays competitive tennis, he won 90 and over, 6-0, 6-0. He says, what am I doing in the 90 and over? I should be in the 80 and over at 95. And he said to Jeff, he says, I hope to give a toast at your 95th birthday when you're my age, because he's got a future. So I think and I do this in a lot of my programs. I ask the team to write down what's their purpose. Why do they go to work? If you go to work for money only, it's not going to be a great life unless you just love making money. But that would be like a Wall Street person, but I just love that. But not a dentist. We're in the healthcare field. I think if you go to work and you really define your purpose and that your work is aligned with that, like you are, Shar, you love teaching, you like helping offices, you like going in. I mean, yes, you make a living, but you really love to make a change. I'm sure if you walk back to my office and you saw how well the hygienists were running now, a lot of that is due to you. It really is. I mean, I think about you almost every day. And when someone has a problem, I say, call Rachel. I think I was the first periodontist you worked with, and they work with
Sure.
mothers. Yeah. So, and periodontists need help as well as restorative dentists. So I think you have to be aligned with your purpose and you have to know what that is. Most people don't think about it. They just get up and they do the thing. It's like Groundhog Day, same thing every day. If it's not working, figure it out. Now, you may not be in the right practice. If you're a hygienist, you don't always have that autonomy. But there are doctors out there that will be aligned with you. One of my hygienists, I have two doctors working for me. One was the one from Poland. I have another hygienist who's from Brazil. She's a doctor. Not only is she a doctor, she's a prosthodontist and endodontist, but she doesn't have a license here. And she was working in a practice and she had it. She had it with American Dentistry. She was burnt out. She came to our practice for an interview and she's been now with me for 4 years. And she says, you saved me, because
Mm.
my practice is in alignment with her, with how she feels.
Mhm.
She loves it. She
Mhm.
loves being there and she gets to do hygiene. We also have her doing an advanced assisting. She does a lot of things for us. She's the sweetest woman. And she's real happy. This was a woman, I mean, a dual specialist comes to America because she married a guy that lives here. She was unhappy because she wouldn't do practice dentistry. So that makes me real happy. But it's not easy. But you don't have to, you're not stuck. You're not an indentured servant. You don't have to stay where you are. And again, I can quote one of my mentors. There are no rules. Everything's made up and no one is in charge. Okay. So you have you have complete charge of your own life unless you are locked up in a jail somewhere. So for those people there in a big house, I said, this is not for you, but most of you are. You're out there and you can do some other things and you're not stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Man, we could just dive into this. We could do a podcast on about 5 different points in this podcast, but
Yeah.
we're all at choice. We're all at choice. and make your future greater than your past.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's not my quote. That's Dan Sullivan's. You walk into his office.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, you been there?
I was in strategic coach for about 3 years. I never got to meet Dan.
Yeah.
But I'm very familiar with the concepts, and it's very it's life changing. So
yeah, his fingerprints are all over my life. I still see him. I've been working with him for 12 years now, and every time I think, well, I know it all, I go up there, and he always sprinkles a little bit more wisdom on there, or just reinforces things that I already know. So
yeah, that's the power of having a great coach. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for sharing this wisdom with us, and it's always a pleasure, and we'll do this again.
All right, love to.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Inspired Hygiene Podcast. We hope you got a ton of value and some things that you can really take away and implement now. So as always, we invite you, if we can help you in any way to optimize your hygiene department, head on over to inspiredhygiene.com. And as always, stay inspired.